Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Sadr Navali, and today I'm going to be talking about the 5 biggest challenges that we face in order to beat climate change. I read Bill Gates' book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, and boy did it change my mind. Things are going to be a lot harder than I originally thought. I feel like most people, including myself, thought that if everyone just installed solar panels and drove electric vehicles, then we'd be fine. No, that's not going to cut it. It would just delay the inevitable. Things are still gonna be really bad. And we can't let that happen, so let's talk about these 5 challenges. A little rise in temperature is a lot, and it's gonna have a severe impact in our climate. For reference, the dinosaur age was only 4 degrees Celsius higher than it is today. And to put that into perspective, there were crocodiles swimming in the Arctic. That's where Santa lives, and crocodiles should not be there. Since 1800, the global temperatures went up by 1 degree Celsius. You guys need to understand that an increase of 2 degrees Celsius is much worse than an increase of just 1.5 degrees. It's not simply 33% worse, because temperature has a compounding effect. So it's more likely to be twice as worse, like 200% worse. If we continue burning fossil fuels at our current pace, experts predict global temperatures will go up by 1.5 to 3 degrees Celsius by 2050. That will be catastrophic for coastal cities. And we have to put an end to this trend because we genuinely are running out of time. Rising temperatures are leading to stronger storms, rising sea levels, and it affects farming severely. When a region gets hit by a storm, it is devastating. They're forced to focus on rebuilding and catching up to where they were rather than advancing and getting ahead. In order to beat climate change, Bill Gates and a vast majority of scientists say that we need to get to 0 carbons. And that will be very hard because we need to make a lot of innovations to our current technology to be able to produce the same amount of energy that we do now without emitting any carbons. Turns out, the energy industry does not advance and innovate as fast as the computer industry. Here's an example. The first car made by Henry Ford had roughly 21 miles per gallon. Now the best hybrid car is 58 miles per gallon. Let's compare that to solar panels. Solar panels in the 1970s absorbed 15% of sunlight and converted it into energy. Today's best solar panels is only 25%. It's been 50 years and it only increased by 10%. It's a myth that we have all the right technology and tools to beat climate change. And all we need to do is, elect the right people to deploy the right government policies. We are so far away from that. There's so much technological innovation that needs to be done. This is the biggest barrier we're facing. Fossil fuels are just way too cheap. I mean, it's like water to us, and we're so dependent on it. Back in 2015, a gallon of gas was cheaper than milk, water, and soda. And it probably still would be if it wasn't for this guy. It's cheap because there's just so much fossil fuels when the Industrial Revolution started. And when governments realized the potential, how it helps countries develop faster and helps pull people out of poverty, then the governments created incentives for companies to continue to mine and create this very cheap energy source. And this made sense to make it cheap in the past, but the earth has changed. And somehow we need to make clean energy just as cheap as oil. And as cheap as it is, we're also insanely reliant on oil. Society demands reliable electricity, so energy businesses can't take risks to innovate. This is the part that worries me most. History teaches us 2 lessons about transitioning from one energy source to another. Number 1, it can take decades to transition. So realistically, switching to clean energy will also take decades. And number 2, history shows that the reason we transition is because the new energy source is more convenient and it's cheaper. The transitions were made due to economic reasons, not environmental. Take a look at this chart. It shows the 5 categories that greenhouse gas emissions come from. Are you surprised to see anything? Because is it just me, or did you also think that electricity made up more than just a quarter of all gas emissions? Electricity and cars get a lot of headlines, but they make up less than half of total emissions. Don't get me wrong, I mean, figuring out clean energy and electric vehicles would be massive. But if we want to beat climate change, we need solutions for all 5 categories, especially the biggest category: cement, steel, and plastic. The issue is that there are no reliable alternatives to any 3 of these. And this material is just as essential to modern life as electricity is. So finding a solution and implementing it is going to be really difficult. Google it for yourself and let me know in the comments if you're able to find an alternative. But just keep in mind, the alternative needs to be just as cheap to produce. Otherwise, it's not going to make economic sense to transition. Global population and standards of living are increasing worldwide, but this also means the amount of energy used per person will increase, and hence the amount of carbon emitted per person will too. Also, don't forget that developing countries will be building infrastructure like cement, roads, cars, and computers, and all of this relies on fossil fuels. It's amazing that people's lives are improving, but it's bad for our fight for climate change. China, India, and Nigeria are the fastest developing economies, but they contribute heavily to global emissions. It'd be unfair to not let poor countries climb the economic ladder just because rich countries burn too many fossil fuels during their development. It doesn't matter that it's bad for our fight for climate change, but we have to let these developing countries catch up to the developed countries. And meanwhile, developed countries need to invest as much money as they can into innovating and producing the right tech so that we can beat climate change. As Bill Gates said in his book, to sum it up, we need to accomplish something gigantic we have never done before, much faster than we have ever done anything similar. I know this video was filled with a lot of bad news and pessimism, so I'm going to end it with a note of hope. Just because the climate is changing does not mean that the Earth is dying. Remember what I said before? The dinosaur age was 4 degrees warmer than it is today. Life thrived back then. So life will continue to thrive regardless of what happens to the climate. Human life, especially the ones in coastal cities, I know it's going to be severely impacted, but I believe one of humans' greatest strengths is our ability to adapt. So no matter what happens, I'm confident that the human race as a whole will adapt and overcome. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next week.